Hey there, my friends. Okay, so where does adversity come in? What do you do when you hit that wall of adversity? How do you pull yourself out of the gutter? And how in the hell are we going to pull ourselves out of the Marianas Trench that's happening right now? Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of The Logistics Life. And, today's one of those episodes where you ever think to yourself, no, I've done that. I've totally done that before. That's like, we've done that. We've had that conversation. And then you speak to an individual and you realize you've had a really good conversation. A, that you never recorded, and B, that you never published because you never recorded it. Well, today, Nick and I are having that conversation that was never recorded, that we are now recording, Nick, and we're going to put it on the podcast. So welcome back, my friend. I'm looking forward to this. And just to give the audience a little bit of background, Nick and I spoke, got to be 2 months ago now, at least. And I mean, we had talks about cancer, and we had talks about recovery, and we had talks about journeys, and we had all these amazing talks. And I swear, Nick, I put you on the podcast, and after about 2 hours of searching podcast by podcast, and I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't I have put his name? And I'm like, I realized we never actually did a podcast, buddy. So welcome.
I want to say, I remember when we talked, it was earlier than 2 months ago, or later than 2 months ago too, because I was sitting outside, and I live in Florida, so I can't work outside this time of year. So I was sitting outside when we talked, and I want to say it was at the end of the day or after. So it was like a Thursday late afternoon, I think. And I think maybe we had talked about it, and you were traveling or doing something or weren't at your schedule. I could be making this up now too. Those things happen, but either way, I'm happy to be here.
Hallucinate sometimes? Is that what you mean?
But when you run a lot, you don't sleep a lot. I mean, it is what
I hear you, brother. So, I mean, let's get into it, because I know obviously your new book, a lot of your posts, a lot of the stuff you share is talking about overcoming adversity, overcoming those challenges, right? Both personal, business, I think life in general. I'm a big believer on you can't have an up without a down. How do you know a good paycheck if you've never seen a bad paycheck? All that stuff, right? So, for you in the market you're in, for you, what you're doing, what are some of the ways that you've been able to really conquer adversity and overcome challenges? I think we'll start there.
First and foremost, we talked about this, I think, just before the show. You used the different words, but I used the word accepting your starting line.
Mm.
You have to accept that this is happening.
Yes.
A lot of times we resist that the bad thing is happening. We draw it out so much longer than it needs to be. We create it so much bigger in our heads. And then oftentimes we kick this can down the road with this victim mindset of just, God, make it stop. Please make it stop. Why me? Why me? But ignoring the problem doesn't make it go away. No. So first and foremost, we have to understand that the greatest challenge isn't overcoming it. It's just facing it. It's saying, I am dealing with this. I am facing this issue. The second is to define it. What does it really mean? And I'll tell you straight up, like, I was in the logistics industry for about 18 years. All right. I had good career, was a VP at one point, had like 90 people working for me. I built and led teams at multiple companies. And as a consultant, like, that was what I really enjoyed doing. My career ended with me getting cut on a Wednesday afternoon. So what did I do? Well, let me go back in time, because I had been crushing it for quite a while. So my personal financial strategy was to pay off debt rather than to, say, put money in the bank. So when I got cut, I wasn't prepared to start a new business. So what did I do? I started a new business, because number one, I accepted my starting line. My starting line is financial constraints, right? So what does that really mean? What is the threat? What is the thing that I'm facing? We're not gonna be homeless. All right. Like, we may have to downsize, we may have to make adjustments, but when we actually put in perspective what the catastrophic thing is, or what the challenge is, and we realize that maybe the only ways it's hurting us is in ego or in fear, all of a sudden we can put these things in perspective. Because then beyond that, you have to ask yourself, why is it that you're trying to get through what you're getting through? What is your purpose? What is the thing that is driving you? And for me, my purpose is to overcome every obstacle and inspire others that they can too. So this is actually an opportunity to do just that. And I have an unwavering belief in my overwhelming success. And that's something about self-talk we could talk about in a minute, because I know I can endure to get there. Most people, they want the easy path to success, right? But bro, I climb mountains for fun. You can't get to the top without going up and down a couple times. And that's not just a metaphor. It exists in every plane. So that's a lot of the ways to overcome our adversity, is to be able to accept it for what it is and accept that we have an opportunity to overcome and to get through it.
I see your point there. No offense to any different generation, but I see a lot of younger generations that want instantaneous success. You look no further than like the influencer market, for example, right? Like everybody on YouTube wants to be the next Mr. Beast. And it's interesting because I watched a bunch of interviews with him. And the one thing he said is like, I made a video like twice a week for like 4 years before anyone barely even knew me. Right? Like we don't see that background that is needed to get to the heights of quote unquote success, personal greatness, whatever it is, however you as an individual, or however anyone as an individual wants to define it, whether it be financial, whether it be, celebrity, all that kind of stuff, right? Called an influencer, get a brand deal online. And I see that more and more these days, especially when it comes to, industries where there is a lot of work up front, where you got to really, and you've probably seen it as well, because in doing what you do, running marathons, running this, the work up front, your foot's got to be on the gas. But once you're conditioned, now, I'm not going to say necessarily take your foot off the gas, because you probably want to keep it on the gas, but it feels easier to get to the next level, right? There's always this, like, put it this way, when you were in logistics, I've often found the first 20 grand a month is one of the hardest steps. Then to get to 50 grand a month is fairly easy. From 75 to 125 a month is fairly difficult, because you have to learn into that person you're looking to become, right? The way you run a $20,000 GP business is not the way you run a $120,000 GP business.
I was literally just talking about that too. The person you want to become. You have to leave things behind.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
You can't become the business that gets you to $20,000 is not the same business that gets you to $100,000. You know how many people die on that vine? They are so convinced that they are stuck at their weekly or monthly GP because they don't have any more time. Fire some fucking customers.
Yeah.
Like level up. You don't get more time of the day. And that was as a sales leader, and like the way I just so edgy said that, it's because I've had that conversation 1,000 times. Yes. And as a leader, I was willing to sacrifice things in order to move forward, because we had to. Like, and the thing is, we need to remember, I get it. We live in a day in and a day out society at most, right? Like everything is right now, right now, right now.
Yeah.
Bro, we're in it for the long game. So be in it for the long game. Think about the small tweaks to your business. X times Y times 40 years. What does that do for you? Right? So the small tweaks make a difference. And that's what, but we got to leave those parts of us behind. And that's for personal development, professional development, and anything. There just comes a point where even parts of you that aren't bad still may not be useful.
Yes.
You know, I got by my ability to be really edgy and manipulate people for a very long time. But there comes a point where that superpower becomes a kryptonite. Not only is it poison relationships, but it was exhausting.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it comes where it doesn't help me anymore. It wasn't who I wanted to be or how I wanted to be as a person anymore.
I felt in the beginning of my career, and now I sit here embarrassed about it, but it's what I knew. It's the way I was trained. It's what I did. It was make as much as you can as fast as possible. And I mean, I remember companies like North American Van Lines. I remember adding margins that were unheard of thinking to myself, like, oh, instead of looking at it and saying, well, don't I want this company in 10 years? It was like, this company's leaving me anyways. I may as well pillage as much as I can and get as much as I can. And I know what you're talking about when it comes to that manipulation. Like everything that would come out of my mouth probably in the first 5 years of me in the industry, I would say anything just to get the sale. I mean, to the point where, Nick, I remember vividly, I had an operations manager and she comes in the office and she goes, Dan, like, and this is probably in year 4 or 5 of my career. I'd partnered with a guy at my office and he was ops, I was sales. He wasn't there. So she came to me and she goes like, Dan, what you've done here is impossible. Like you've promised the impossible. And I remember, and embarrassing as it is, gosh, it's crazy how we grow up. I looked at her and I said, listen, my job is to bring it in. Your job is to book it for money. So go do your job. That was my answer to a colleague. And I remember the look like, who the fuck are you, man? Like, holy shit. But it was just, that's what it was, Nick. That's the way I was programmed. And I wouldn't even think of saying that today. Like, wow, dude, I wouldn't even think of it.
Literally the first 2 chapters, and I think the very first chapter of my new book, I describe the same type of behavior for myself.
Yeah.
And I say like, and there's an evolution of the different phases of myself, because there were things I was good at that blinded me from the things I was bad at, such as talking to people like that. And, finding validation from people who liked you talking to people like that. And also the fact that just because people talk to you like that doesn't mean you should talk to others like that. And confusing winning, and like just blind yourself. But eventually when it starts to work against you, you blame everyone else for it. And so literally I describe that same thing in my book. And I realize it's because part of it is, and this is going to probably resonate with a lot of people, but overcoming, whether it be personal adversity or achieving something, even in sales, right? We build something, we grind, we do all this upfront work for days, weeks, months, and years. We get somewhere, and then we take our foot off the gas. And then that drive, the drive that we were willing to, we had no fear. We had just had this vision of success for ourselves, right? We replace all of that with this terrifying, just paralyzing fear of losing it all. And then we stop putting in the work. We start making excuses. We build a wall around ourselves, and we watch it all go away.
I've talked to so many people, and one of the things I said just as the pandemic hit, I said, whatever people do, don't stop selling. Do not stop selling. It was so easy to get business during the pandemic. And I was screaming it from the rooftops. And it was interesting because I was out west and I met an old colleague of mine. And one of the things we talked about when he was driving me to the airport was, Dan, I'm almost afraid to sell now, because in this business, and I'm sure you know it, and I'm sure everybody watching and listening that has been down this, what I call the coasting road, is we build up a book of business and then we start coasting. Right? We're like, we're like you said, I'm super busy. I got no time. And whether that's 50, 100, 120 G's, you always have 10 rungs above you that you can scale to, I believe, wholeheartedly as a human, because running $120,000 GP a month, you can't tell me you're as busy as Elon Musk running his companies, right?
So, cut the bottom part.
Yes, exactly. And I remember him saying, Dan, one of the problems was I haven't sold in so long. I'm like, ego plays a big role because you were a huge producer. Like this guy was a really big producer, right? So he's like, my concern is, and it was really cool for him to open up, because not many, especially guys, would open up like that. And he goes, Dan, you know what my concern is? My concern is I call the next person and I get hung up on. They tell me to take a hike, He goes, and then my vision of myself as a good salesperson is going to disappear. And I go, welcome to the world of coasting. That is exactly what it's like. Anything, right? I remember when I was working out like crazy, I was strong as an ox, and then my hip seized. So I had to stop for a bit to go through therapy and get it done. And I remember going back to the gym, and I literally switched from bench press to dumbbells because I was embarrassed at how much strength I lost. And think of how stupid that is. Like, it's just, this up here sometimes just fucks with you so bad. It's like, why would I care what that person thinks I'm lifting? Why in the hell do I care?
And the funny part is they don't care.
Exactly.
They don't even know what you're lifting. First,
No.
when we're done here, give me your friend's address because I'm sending him my new book, because it's exactly
There you go. Yes, sir.
And part of it is this. One of the reasons I talk about, those terrible, awful, terrible KPIs, metrics. When you know your numbers, then the outcome is not a reflection on you. So you know your numbers, you work the numbers. You don't have to live and die by every sale. You don't have to live and die by every cold call. You know, if I do X, I should get Y. And I don't have, it has no impact on my ego, my heart, or my mental endurance. And I can just find out that part. Plus, why do I want to think about the shit I don't want to do anyway? Be robotic for that part. Get it done. Get to the part where you get to be the salesperson and use your expertise. So I
always enjoyed getting rejected in front of people. And for a lot of people, this is the exact opposite of what they enjoy. But I was always like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I mean, I remember the point, Nick, where I had my VP of sales walk in the office and I got like annihilated on a call, and I hung up the call and I go, nah, I didn't do that right. And I picked up the phone and I'm like, just give me 10 minutes. I dialed the person back. I go, okay, something must be wrong because you said no to me. And my VP of sales, this was 24 years ago. He still remembers that. I go, what if I were to say one thing? He goes, it's the time you picked up that phone. Because I've never really cared about that. You know, like you've probably been in it because you've managed a lot of people before, where some people, and it's no ill against any of them. So please, anyone watching, listening, don't take this the wrong way, please. But it's like some people need to be in that quiet room when nobody's around in order for them to make sales calls, right? I always found when there was more people around, it gave me more energy.
Same.
You did the same. Okay, good. I'm glad we're on that page because I actually dip into that.
When I go to the gym and nobody's there, I find a reason to leave early. I actually need the commotion. And then, by the way, I don't really go to the gym. I work, which is ironic because I work out by myself outside in the dark almost 100% of the time. But when I used to go to the gym, I wanted that energy. I get the whole in office versus remote, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But not every company is the same. Not every team is the same. Not every role is the same. Not every person is the same. And I will tell you, the thing that is missing absolutely is a camaraderie of working amongst other people and just the energy of working amongst other people. Yes, there are distractions too. And of course but honestly, if we're nervous about making the same calls that the person next to us is making, like, I get it, but that's the thing we can't avoid. That's the thing we have to do. We have to get over it. And by the way, we may not even get over it. We have to do it anyway. And that's how you build mental endurance. That's how you build resilience. That's how you get tougher. Then you don't give a shit. Tell you what, I started my sales career in telecom right out of college. I was 22. All right. I was selling voice and data services. And for the first hour or two of the day, we were just supposed to grind out the phone and try to set appointments with local businesses. All right. So you
had like a power dialer and everything going?
No, we were old school. This was like 2001.
But you had like a quota where you had to pick up the phone, or if they saw you not on the phone, like, was there any of that kind of scenario?
Oh, no. Yeah. This is how my first day was. Everyone got up and stood around my desk.
I love that. That is actually, talk about anxiety, but that is awesome.
And so I actually told this story to somebody earlier today. I learned how to snowboard when I was about 21 years old. And I was with a couple of my really good friends, my oldest friends. And on the way up there, I knew they were going to make fun of me all weekend.
Because you didn't know how to snowboard.
Right. So that was going to happen, right? So I had to make a decision.
You're with the guys. Of course they are, brother.
Exactly. So I had to make a decision, though. Did I want them to make fun of me for sucking at snowboarding or being afraid of snowboarding? So I said, fuck it, let her rip. And I mean, I tumbled down that mountain more times than I remember. But I'll tell you what, they didn't make fun of me at all. So when these guys are standing around me, I'm like, you know what? They can make fun of me for sucking at something that, honestly, this is the first call I'm making, right? What am I expecting for myself? But I'm not going to let them make fun of me for being afraid to make it. And I ripped, man. And that was how I realized I have to get over certain fears. I talk about this all the time. I am deathly deathly afraid of snakes, irrationally afraid of snakes. Okay. It could be like show up at my front door with free tickets to Vegas in its mouth, and it is still like a demon hell thing. Okay. I don't like snakes.
Yep.
Where do I spend my weekends? Racing through swamps in Florida and climbing up mountains and shit. Like
where there's snakes.
I have not overcome my fear of snakes, but I move beyond it. So I do what I have to do because I'm not going to let that fear prevent me from doing what I have to do. And that's what
I love that you said that. So we are so much alike, brother. I used to have a huge phobia, arachnophobia, like spiders for
my wife
me.
does.
I was a kid. Okay. So I was about 10 years old, I guess. And I remember, like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I remember vividly, I felt something on my chest. I woke up, I looked down, and there was, I swear to Lord, the spider was this big. Like, obviously not, but it was a tarantula in my mind, right? And I watched it bite me right in the chest. And it was almost like, to the point I was so scared when I first saw Spider-Man, when the spider bit him, I couldn't look. Like, it was like, oh my God, that scared Nick. And it's a movie, right? So I remember sitting there and I was reading Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And part of in that book, and then Bob Proctor's You Were Born Rich. And part of that whole process, you know, going from there to Raymond Hollowell, the laws of the universe and working with the law and all this, it said, like, you got to confront it. So you know what I did? I rented Arachnophobia and I watched the movie and I told myself, I have to watch it over and over and over and over again until I don't stop looking.
I just have to do it to know I can. Now, there are certain things like, am I going to go handle a snake? No.
Yeah.
But I know that I can because I know that I've been there with them. You know how I face it? You're going to laugh. When I see them around my house, which I see them all the damn time, I curse at them. I run up to them and admonish them. I'm like,
and you yell at them.
Like, F you, snake. Like, yeah, I admonish them. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, stupid snake. Like, that was a big deal for me. All right. It went from shrieking like a little girl to that. So we're making progress.
Yeah. Yep.
But I use that as a metaphor for a lot of things because, you know, I don't remember who originally said this quote. It might have, I don't remember who the original guy was, but I learned this from my former boss from Blue Grace, Bobby. And paraphrasing that, you can measure a person's success by the number of uncomfortable conversations they're willing to have. And he told me that once a long time ago. And anytime I was about to walk into an uncomfortable conversation, I just told myself that, because it didn't say how good you are at the conversation or how you had to win. It just said the number of uncomfortable conversations you were willing to have.
I think that was Brian Tracy. I want to look that up because I love that quote. And I was just listening to a Brian Tracy book the other day, and he said something very similar. And I'm wondering if it was either Jim Rohn, who obviously, Brian Tracy,
Harris or Herb Keller is what's sticking in my mind.
But Herb Keller, probably. Yeah, that could have been it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, it could be. We'll look that up. But Bobby was the one who told me that, and it literally just became my rip the Band-Aid off. So if I'm like, I'll sit down and say, you know what? You can measure a person's success by the number of uncomfortable conversations I'm willing to have.
Pick up the phone.
Do it. Yeah. And, damn be the outcome. And so efforts over outcomes it's how we build the mental endurance. It's how we face the adversity. We realize that we are only responsible for our own actions.
Yes.
I can influence outcomes. I cannot control them. So I might lose, but I'm going to try. I'm going to make the effort. And at the end of the day, even if I sucked at sales, even if I counted my numbers and realized that I needed to make 100 calls just to have one good one prospect even, right? Well, why am I afraid of that? Now I have a starting point. I don't need to use emotion about it. I can start looking at it, practically. What do I need to do to make it so that tomorrow it's 2? What are the tweaks I need to make? Maybe it's not even me. Maybe I'm just calling the wrong damn people. Maybe I should narrow the focus, right? It's probably, listen, I'm big on scripts for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, though, is so that you don't use a bunch of filler words. Yep. But
I look at scripts like this, Nick. every movie we love, scripted. Every
Favorite
movie that
actor?
changes your life, scripted.
Scripted.
Every speech that you hear the professionals give, believe it or not, folks, is scripted for the most part. They do it over and over
And the
and
reason it
over and
sounds so
over.
good and natural is that they practice it, they rehearse it.
Mhm.
So therefore, it doesn't sound natural. It is natural. And when
Yep.
you aren't thinking of what to say, you can listen.
Exactly. Exactly.
Plus,
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I believe in sales, in any sales, have one really big lead-in question that you ask all the time, preferably that pulls out something towards your ICP.
yep.
And within a week, you'll know every single rebuttal everyone says. Within a week, you'll have an entire list to get better on. And all you got to do is keep asking the same things over and over and over.
And plus,
You know,
for those,
there's a reason movies. What's the line again? Oh yeah, okay. This, and you know what? You said something that I think goes far beyond even that piece, the filler words. That I think is even more important because you're eliminating the ums, the ahs, the yes, the ands, all the filler words. You're getting concise. You're bringing it right to the point, and you're deploying that in a split second.
and for those who, especially some of us salty vets, I don't want to use a script and blah, blah, blah. You can't script the wholesale. You're right. You can't. You can script maybe this much of it. So script it. The rest is your structure and your objectives and your the questions that you plan to ask, right? Everything else goes through a process. And there are phrases in certain parts of the sale that you use, but you can't script every single word of a sale. But we can script that beginning part. How many ways are there to say, hi, my name is?
Yeah, I think we can script at least 75% of it, to be honest with you, brother. Because I look at it like this. Like I often tell people, come up with a storybook, meaning a set of stories that you rehearse, that you understand, that you can deploy to make a point. Not only that, QCESP. So I have a formula: qualifying question, clarifying question, expert story positioning. And if you run that in sequence, you can stack these on top of each other for any conversation the whole time. You know, I ask you a question, you give me an answer, I clarify that question, then we share a story on it. It's pretty much the exact way this whole podcast has gone so far. It's pretty much the exact way most of our conversations go. If we don't need clarification, if we understand someone say, oh my gosh, I got a great story about that. And you know what happens? I find anyways, you don't sell. You have a conversation that leads to a deeper conversation that leads to, you know, a relationship that just happens to have a financial transaction in and amongst it. And when we do that, you know, it's like anything, right? Somebody grabs your book from Barnes and Noble or Indigo or whatever, and they pick it up and they read it, or they get it on, you know, Audible or Amazon, you know, download the first sample or the first chapter kind of thing, and they read it. Your story is what gets them to buy.
Yeah.
It's all about that. So, you know, I believe in having scripted stories, meaning if this is the problem or this is the rebuttal, tell a story how it debunks the rebuttal, right? And that's why I say 75 to 80% of everything we do. Now, I know some people are probably going, scripted, Dan, you know, that's when you have no, but I mean, like, what you're going to.
You're saying the same thing, because what I call structure for the parts of it.
Yeah.
Because, for example, a discovery call, right? I can plan it, and I do, but I'll be lucky if 60% of what I want to have happen on that call is what happens on that call.
Yes.
But I still have to prepare for the rest. So I didn't write a script for that call because it was going to be too many tentacles, but I had my structure. These are the areas I want to cover. These are the things I need to learn. These are the areas we may go. Mm-hmm. This is my plan B for when we're running out of time to main for blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, so to your point, that sort of plug and play. And then when it comes to actually, you know, presenting the solutions, right? Well, yeah, it's like the story. If you want to tell someone how it works, tell them how it worked.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, you look at it and you say, you know, I've often said, especially, you know, we see eye to eye on this point 1000%, is that first piece, right? If you ask the same question every time, you will get within a couple of days, you'll find every answer, because people are just going to have the same answer in a different variation, maybe in their verbiage and their terminology as opposed to a different one. But in a very short period of time, you know exactly what people are going to say. So it's like, which one of the 5 is Nick going to say when I ask him this question? Because you've asked it so many times, kind of thing, right? I think that structure allows us to be way more effective. And like you said, it allows us to listen more, because now I can listen to you, and in a split second, my brain will go to one of the 5 things that I need to then, reply with, or clarify, or share a story on. And very, very quickly, you get to the root of what you need on any conversation. I believe that wholeheartedly. So I fully believe that we need to script things out to a certain point. But I also believe you need to be fluid like water. If the shit goes sideways, you need to be able to.
Well, that's where, especially speaking to the people who've been around for a while on this one, that's where experience comes in.
Yes.
And it's not to abandon the play, it's to navigate it. It's when to call an audible, when to whatever, and I'll tell you what, I was every other 24-year-old sales rep who'd been around for a minute, who thought the script was stupid, the presentation was stupid, and was using my own words. Not only were my sales tanking, my self-confidence was going down like that friend, right? And my numbers were going down. Therefore, everything sucked. And you're finding your way in life at that age too. So it's not like I really had this big beacon of something else going on. So everything was starting to get affected. And through a referral, I got into this one big account. I remember it was called Holyoke Paper. It was Holyoke, Massachusetts. And this is on the same day, actually. Oh, no. Yes, I do. I write about this in my book too. It was on the same day that my VP of sales was going to be in town. Normally, I would have been scared that he was there to whack me, but since I had that big account to go into, he goes there, and I'm like, yeah, dude, now I get to see how the bulldog really does it, right? He's like, this is the guy. He didn't disappoint. It was the best presentation I had ever seen. And it was word for word the script I had been taught. It was just natural and delivered. Yep. And he was able to insert some personal humor, and he was able to look at the people and see how they're reacting, because he didn't have to think about what to say. So he could think 2-3 moves in advance.
Yes.
And start to put those dots together. Because, and for anybody because not everybody thinks the same way. All right. I'm a chess player. I'm a poker player. I'm thinking as many moves down the line as I can. If that's not you, if you're not the person who's got that structured approach to it, then just be a student and don't let yourself off the hook. Don't say, okay, I hear you, unless you actually do. Make sure you understand the problem and find ways to relate it back. Just watching this episode, you and I told 6 or 7 different stories that do not directly relate to what we're talking about, just so we can relate about what we're talking. Everybody has that ability. Everybody has some frame of reference that they can use to say, okay, am I understanding this correctly? Is this what this means? Okay, cool. Got it.
I love this. And I love this topic, because I think it's so meaningful. I remember watching a Joe Rogan podcast. He had Kevin Hart on, and he said to Kevin Hart, he says, your tour is just awesome. He goes, what was your preparation? And he says, almost a year. I went into comedy club after comedy club, and he says, and I'm working jokes to the point where, okay, they didn't laugh. I have to rework it. I have to rework. And they work for such a long time before they go on tour, because they hit one after another, after another, after another. And we come out, and I'm pushing this point again, Nick, because I think people need to understand this. We come out and see Kevin Hart, and we're like, my Lord, that man's the funniest man on the planet. He's so funny. He's done it 1,000 times before you see it on tour in small comedy clubs, where he just shows up on stage. He's not a headliner. He's not announced. He just goes into the back and he shows up on stage. And I was actually blown away, because I knew, comedians, they need to test their work. But I thought when you're at a level that he's at, he can just write stuff that's funny and call me ignorant to it. I thought that about myself about 10, 15 years into my career. I'm like, I can sell any account. I don't, and quickly my ego got whipped immediately into shape, being like, no, you don't want any account.
I was going to say, that's the worst thing to be right about, is that you can sell any account.
Yeah.
That held me back for so long earlier in my career because I could. So I did. I sold every podunk piece of shit count that couldn't make me money, but kept the boss off my back for a day. I did what was easy, what was comfortable.
Yeah, because you were moving freight.
And just slinging crap, right? Like finding things. I'll tell you what, you know what the differentiator was for me? And this is actually back when the company I worked for was still a DHL reseller. All right.
Okay.
So I was we had to do this weekly report. I mean, this is old school. This is like 2005. All right. Where I literally would have to calculate my margin and tell them what I made for the week and submit it on a spreadsheet. And I had sold a new account, a DHL account that had a ground package that I went and picked up and dropped off for him to close them for that day. Okay. I looked at the margin on that. I looked at what I was going to make. My commission on that package was going to be 15 cents. Now wait for it. I had to go there the first place. I had to go back for my appointment. I had to go back to close them. Right. I worked for about 3 hours for that 15 cents. You know how often they shipped again after that?
No.
Neither do I.
I was hoping you were going to say like, 15 times a day, man. I made 65 cents every day from this guy for 10 years.
Yeah.
But,
right. If it was 1,000 packages a day after that, I'm not like, and that's what you do to get started. That's great. But you know what? I hear it all the time, dude. And I know, look, LinkedIn is self-promotion a lot of the time too. That's whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. So you see some of that story of like, I picked up my customer's freight and did this for him. All right. Like that's fine. But we're in business to make money.
Yeah.
I speak and coach to help people, but I'm a speaker and a coach to make money. Like it ain't a sale. Like that's great if you did that, but where's the ROI? Did you do that because you're going to get 1,000 shipments a week and you're going to make a lot of money on it? And by the way, something I want to mention this earlier because you talked about when you make a lot of money on a customer. I have a completely different point of view than I think most people on this then, because if I can make 1,000% markup on every shipment, I'm going to. And it has nothing to do with robbing anybody of anything, because I'm going to create as much value for the people that I am buying from and providing for in that, because that I don't want to lose that. Yeah. Right. When I was a VP of a company a while back, one of my reps was making $1,000 a shipment. All right. And he was like, oh my God, or like whatever. And it was, I mean, we weren't hitting him over the head because it was also less than they were paying before. Right. My competition's calling them every day. The market's going to take care of itself right there. Okay. So what did I want to do? Lowering the price was not how I was going to hold on to that customer.
Add more value.
So when shit hit the fan on one of their shipments, and this was a new rep, he'd been there like 3 months. He's like, oh my God, right? I got 2 directors over here, like 3 managers. And I was like, this shit needs to be fixed right now. Like, you know, more in the asking for help voice. And they all went to work and got it done like that. And he saw this happen, right? And I go, that's why they pay $1,000. Like, that's why we make $1,000 a shipment. Create that value. And you know what? Like, I want to make sure if I'm moving with a consistent, like, carrier on that, by all means, like, it ain't about making the extra $100 either. So I have no problem making money on something that you are earning the money for.
I always, not always, very early on, I started to realize that the amount of money you make is in direct proportion to what the client needs.
100%.
Right? Like if the client's like, hey, pick it up, deliver it whenever, then don't expect to make 65 points on it. Right? Like LTL or something. Don't expect that. But when I had pharmaceuticals and the guy said, okay, you've got 27 hours to get it to location. If it's not at location, there's $3 million in pharmaceuticals in the truck. We have rhyme meters in the truck. I want a smart reefer. I want in transit reports and I want this. And I originally, when I started working with this customer, was like, okay, I'll put, you know, a couple $100 on it, whatever. Self-insured. So it's not as if it was on my insurance or I had to worry about any of that. But then when I started to get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, asking me where it is, I'm like, okay, big time out here. The next one, 5K is going on it. Right. And I didn't mean any ill by it. I mistakenly one day sent him the invoice. My company sent him the invoice and he goes, Dan, let me ask you this. Why are you making $5,000 on this load? I said, you know what? Full transparency, what you want and the service I give you is worth that. You know, he says, yep, you're right. Good. I'm glad.
And
He goes, I'm
if I'm
glad
not
you're
earning
making
my
money because I'm making money. He goes, I want you to be around because that's the service I need. So I agree with that 100%.
I mean, that said, it's not always about, there's always a not risk versus reward, strong way of saying it, but I'd rather make $200 a load and get 10 loads than, one load a week. And if that, like, whatever's going to, because I do want that consistency and that, like, whatever, that's another way that you survive the highs and lows of the industry is by having a good foundation. And so that way, when things are going well, you start excelling again, you add new business, and then you're thriving.
Yep. 100%. And that's what I believe. The cost plus model, I think, is one of the greatest models we can deploy in today's economy, in today's day and age. The transparency, the ability to, make a decent margin, because here's the thing, you look at companies like Walmart, they want a 50% margin. Costco will not do anything unless it's a 37% margin. That's the minimum margin they will make on selling any product in their store. Canadian Tire, 50% margin. Home Depot, 50% margin. Like, these companies will literally tell you, when during the pandemic, I had started to import micro mist sanitized sprayers. And I got a batch flown in. We got them made with our logo on them and everything. And I sent them out to a few people that sell to Walmarts and like Canadian Tires and all these other, big box stores, both Canada and US. And Costco came back and said, you know what, we're very interested. Walmart came back and said they're very interested. So we had to like design this bulk pack for Costco because everything's bigger at Costco, right? But I remember them saying, okay, so we're going to sell it in this, like Walmart came back to us and said, okay, we're going to sell it in the store for $20. I need you to give it to me for 10. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh boy. Okay. I'm like, what kind of orders are we talking about? And they're like, well, we'll take 20,000 units. If you can. And this is what really put it over the edge. They said, we need it guaranteed in 45 days. And during the pandemic, you could not guarantee a container in 45 days. I was not willing to put out, 150 grand to guarantee something that probably would have came in 49 days or something. Of course, it would have been like 3 days off and they would have canceled the order and all that. So in the end, we elected as a company, we said, you know what, we're not willing to, because they wanted a guarantee, no ifs, ands, or buts, guarantee. So we'd either fly it in at 10 times the cost and lose a lot of money on the first order for repeat business. But then if we have that guarantee again, now we're just flying it in and we're paying money to sell a product. Doesn't make sense. But it was interesting because you start diving in and I was like, well, what do you mean? You won't budge on that $10 is the max you'll pay for it? And then I said, no, we make 50%, everything we sell. So the companies we work for, the companies we move freight for, the companies we work with, the companies we help solve challenges have a margin they want to make as well. I think as a salesperson, you should be able to talk about these margins and say like, listen, my profit and Nick, I'm sure you've done it as well. You're making a couple $100 and the customer says, oh, Dad, I'm only making $50 on this order. Or, can we, all that BS that goes with it. And it's just, to me, that transparency is everything these days. And I think it's everything when you become a real professional. Does that make sense? Like when you're an amateur, when you're trying to build it, you will say anything to close the sale. When you're a professional, you operate at a higher standard. If I could say that without insulting anyone.
It may not even, that's part of it, but also you have a different set of tools. So when I was younger, I'll be honest, I never sold anything that I didn't feel comfortable selling. I wasn't willing to compromise my integrity for anybody. However, but I could close people by bullying them, and I did. And again, that's a short-lived thing. So, but later I became really, really, really good at needs investigation. I was a private investigator for 20 years too. I was trained.
Were you really?
Yeah, I was trained by the FBI. I got some tricks.
Nice, dude. Way to go. I love that.
As a matter of fact,
you're like a Chris Voss kind of negotiator.
Selling Inspired is the book I just wrote, but I was writing a book called The Investigators, which is candidly was going to be every sales book you've ever read, but it was going to have this unique pitch on the needs investigation. And the idea, to your point earlier, was going to be if you ask enough of the right questions, you will uncover the true buying motive, because nobody shows up with their cards on the table. And when you understand what they're really trying to accomplish outside of your little silo, what it means for them, the impact of what that change will be. Like, you've got a customer for life. So that was the book. But even though clearly I'm passionate about this topic, I wasn't enjoying writing the book. I was trying to write a book different than the way that I write. I was trying to write like I'm someone else. And I think it was going to be a good book. And then my laptop got fried and I lost it. I lost just about 30,000 words. If anybody wants to have
good.
Yeah.
I'm saying good because you know what? If you weren't writing as you, the book wouldn't have done good anyways.
And then
it wouldn't have done well. It would never have worked. It would never have lasted. There would have been so much controversy at it. And you know what? I don't think you would have been able to sell it because you probably wouldn't have been happy with it, brother.
And it wouldn't have been about what I talk about now because it was going to be very sales specific. And whereas Selling Inspired is 26 chapters, only 5 of them are on sales. It's a book for salespeople, and it's a book on mindset and overcoming challenges. Because I'll tell you what I have experienced is this. There is a process to overcoming obstacles, and it is the same. Whether it be a sales objection, personal adversity, a life challenge, an actual 10-foot wall with mud all over it, the process broken down objectively is the same. And if you look, when you realize that, and you can sometimes look at these things that, might terrify us down to the soul, or may just be really sucky and we don't want to do it. Break it down to those steps, face it that way, take those steps, execute quickly. Nib high football rules. Let's go.